Hello there. Welcome to Just the Discs. We talk about Blu-rays here. Today I have 4 discs to talk about. Wide-ranging group of stuff. We'll start in the classic era with some noir from a great company called Flicker Alley, which I've talked about here before, but I think it's been a minute. And they do a lot of really great work. Restorations often in conjunction with UCLA Film and Television Archive and the Film Noir Foundation as well. So Eddie Muller et al. And they've found some really great foreign noirs in the recent years. Basically, things like Bitter Stems. A lot of these are Argentine, I believe, or Mexican noir. They may all be Argentine. The Beast Must Die. Most recently, before this one, El Vampiro Negro. So there's some really nice foreign noirs if you're a noir head. These are movies you probably haven't seen or heard of. And this latest one is called Never Open That Door. It's from 1952. Directed by a guy named Carlos Hugo Christensen. And I just want to say at the top, I love that Flicker Alley still does combo packs. So you have a Blu-ray and a DVD. Criterion discontinued that long ago, but I would imagine their audience could be a little bit older in some cases, and maybe some people haven't upgraded yet. I know DVDs obviously still sell more. I think maybe Blu-rays just passed them now recently. I don't know, but I know DVDs still sell. So I'm glad to see for fans of noir that they don't have to have a Blu-ray player if they don't want to, and they can check out this noir. Now, this is a really interesting one because it is based on the writings of Cornell Woolrich. I think he might be under a pseudonym, John Irish or something like that. And Cornell Woolrich, very famous writer from the classic film era, had a ton of stuff that he wrote that was adapted into films, like Rear Window being the big one, Phantom Lady, The Leopard Man, Bride Wore Black, Mississippi Mermaid, The Window, Night Has a Thousand Eyes. It's a long list, and he's a writer whose prose is really well suited to film. Like, these have turned into some very interesting movies. And this was originally to be, as I understand it, an anthology of 3 stories, but it ended up being 2 with another separate film that is also a bonus feature on this disc, which is great too. So Never Open That Door, 2 anthology stories, and each one opens with like a shot of a book. The first story is called Somebody on the Phone, and then Anguish. And it has to do with a brother-sister relationship, adult brother-sister, this gentleman named Raul and his sister Luisa, and they are the children of some wealthy parents that I think run a factory. And one night Raul sees his sister out at a nightclub meeting a strange man. It's unclear what's going on. She takes off a diamond ring, her mother's diamond, I guess, and gives it to the man, and her brother's very curious. What's also interesting is the movie does not necessarily establish they are brother and sister right away, so you're kind of like, what is the relationship between these two? And it's one of those kind of weird, overly protective, maybe more brother-sister things. And not to go too deep into it, but you find out that she's being blackmailed for some gambling debts, and he wants to get to the bottom of it, and something happens to her, and it propels him forward, and the film ends rather abruptly, but in an interesting and poignant way. A telephone is a big part of the story, as you can see, somebody on the phone. Part of it is the blackmailer calls and has a signal to her that's like ring 5 times and hang up, and if she's alone, then she'll pick up on the next ring or something like that. So that's kind of part of the story. But I don't really want to get too far into it because it's the shorter end of this 2-story thing. But it's interesting and it plays out in a fun way. The second story is called The Hummingbird Comes Home. Pain. I guess each one of these has like the story title and like an emotion with it. And this one is about an old blind woman who lives with her younger, basically not quite adult age niece, but attractive young niece. And she is awaiting the return of her son. She hasn't seen him in 8 years, I think. And she's waiting for a letter. She gets a letter at the beginning of the film, and it's for her. She's like, I never get letters. So she thinks maybe it's from him, but it's not. It's like some kind of something from the bank. But lo and behold, he does return with a couple buddies. He is now a bank robber and has robbed a bank and has decided to go to his mother's home for refuge with of the two colleagues he has with. One of them was wounded in the robbery. We see a little bit of it. And he ends up dying at the mother's house. The mother is kind of crestfallen because she's gotten her wish to see her son, but of course he's an awful person and he's kind of mean to her, and the other living colleague of his is very much attracted to the young niece, and that's kind of creepy. So then it becomes a thing of like, what can she do? What will she do? And, you know, there's a bit of turning out the lights, equalizing with blindness. There's some twists toward the end that she sort of takes on the son and his associate. But it is an interesting story. The ending, I kind of saw coming. You know, I can kind of see where it's going. But it's still a neat story and well told and well directed. So I ended up enjoying this one. Now, this, as I said, it also includes Never Open That Door is the main feature, and then the bonus materials, we get one called If I Should Die Before I Wake, which is only about 67 minutes long. Was to have been the third part of this movie, but is its own movie, and I kind of like that it's his own movie. And if I'm honest, I actually like it the most of anything on this disc. Like that movie is the one that got me the most. I liked the other two in the anthology of Never Open That Door, but this one really got me. So If I Should Die Before I Wake, obviously it's also the same director, also based on Cornell Woolrich. I guess the print they used is like the last print that I can't remember if they made one. UCLA made a copy of a print that was deteriorating, and then the print is gone now, so they can't make another. So this is a print that's rare and has subtitles burned into it. But it was fine. It was a good enough looking print and a really interesting story. So it's a kid noir, a story of two kids, a boy and a girl, grade school age. I think they're 5th grade maybe. And the boy, his father's a like second class lieutenant in the police. And this girl is a girl he doesn't seem to like at first, but actually does like. And she tells him, like, she gets this like 10-cent candy, this really expensive candy. And he's just kind of like eyeing it one day at school, and she gives him half of it. And he's like, where did you get that? Like, who's buying that for you? She's like, I can't tell you. He's like, no, I want to know. And so she makes him swear like this life oath that like to the death, they can never speak of this. And that becomes sort of a plot point. And he's like, okay. And he does the oath. And then she says it's like this older man that she meets at the newsstand who says she's the prettiest girl in school, really eerie stuff. And that one day he's going to take her to his place, which is filled with balloons and toys. And you're just like, oh man, this does not sound good at all. And the boy kind of has that vibe too. And one day he actually sees the guy. And then I think it's the same day or maybe the day after, the little girl, he sees her going with him and she disappears the next day. Is gone. Doesn't show up in school. And the dad starts looking for her, ends up finding her body. She's been killed by this guy. He's a child murderer is the thing. And the kid overhears his parents talking about the murder and actually has this horrible nightmare. And one of the stylish, cool things about the movie is it actually portrays his nightmare, which is just really out there and fantastic and bizarre and stylish, and ends with a shot of the girl's hand sticking up from this pile of rubbish. It's alarming and disconcerting. It's a dark movie for 1952, really. So not to go too far down the road, because obviously I want to leave something for you guys to enjoy, but I think it's about 2 or 3 years later. But okay, so the coming back to the oath, the kid asks his parents, he's like, basically trying to ask them, can I break this oath? Is it okay for me to betray the trust of someone if it's important? And they're basically like, no, your word is your bond. You can't. And so the information he has about the guy, he doesn't give to his dad, and the guy seemingly gets away with it. And then 3 years later, I think it shows him going through a couple different grades. He's in another situation with another girl who likes colored chalk and likes to draw on walls, which also becomes kind of a plot thing. And she's got these really expensive chalks, and he asks her about it, and she's like, you can't tell anybody. And he's like, okay. And she's like, I meet this guy by the newsstand. And you're like, oh no, he's still around. He's still doing this. But this time the kid knows better, and he's scared for her and tries to rescue her but he's sort of become a persona non grata in his classroom, and his parents, and especially his dad, are like, if you get in trouble anymore and if you get expelled, we'll basically disown you. And so while he's trying to warn the girl, he ends up getting himself in trouble. And I don't go too further. Maybe she's taken, maybe she's not, but it does go pretty dark towards the end, and it just really hooked me. It's a definite discovery for me, this one. I really enjoyed the movie. So this has got some nice features on it. It has Cornell Woolrich, Fear Has No Borders, which is a new featurette. It says by Stephen C. Smith and writer, film historian Alan K. Rohde, and it's about 25 and a half minutes. But that would make you think it's just those two involved, and I don't know if it's Stephen C. Smith is making it or what, but basically it opens with an intro from Eddie Muller on stage at a recent Noir City Film Festival event at the Egyptian Theater in Los Angeles. So he introduces the movie there, and then it transitions to a sit-down interviews with Alan K. Rohde, who's just a great classic film scholar. I enjoy his commentaries, but he's great in this interview. Novelist Haley Sutton, novelist Gary Phillips, film critic, lecturer Maria Elena de la Carreras, and then it cuts back to the Eddie Muller intro periodically. So it goes between those folks as they talk about Cornell Woolrich, his writings, the many film adaptations, specific commentary with regards to Never Open That Door and If I Die Before I Wake, and just how Woolrich was adapted all around the world, not just in the U.S., but definitely is most known for his U.S. stuff. So that's very cool. On top of that, we have something called Preserving Memory, Fernando Martin Peña on our Argentine cinema. And this is, Peña is a cinema historian and Argentina's leading film archivist. So he talks about, Argentine cinema in that featurette. Oh, there's also a commentary by author and film historian Guido Segal on Never Open That Door. And we have a souvenir booklet with rare original photographs, posters, and ephemera. So there's little captions and stuff, but it is not exactly your traditional essay booklet. It's more of it has little fact stuff in it, but it's more pictures and stuff. So that's cool that they have that included as well. But overall, a really nice package from Flicker Alley. Definitely recommend checking out their noirs. They have a lot of great American noirs that they've done over the years, and just a great company, and these are UCLA Film and Television Archive and Film Noir Foundation restorations, so they look as good as they're gonna look, basically. But it's a really nice release from them. Now moving on to something a little bit more recently, but not totally present day, and that's Shotgun Stories from 2007. This is the debut feature from director Jeff Nichols, who would go on to do things like Take Shelter and Mud and Midnight Special and Loving and Long Way Back Home, which I haven't seen. And he's got a new movie called The Bike Riders coming out in a couple weeks. Oh, did I say Midnight Special? I forgot. Anyway, so he's a director I've enjoyed. I like Take Shelter and Mud in particular a lot. I think those are really interesting movies. And he's just a really unique voice. He is sort of I don't know if he's a classmate of David Gordon Green, but they both went to the North Carolina School of the Arts. And David Gordon Green is actually a producer on this film. And you can kind of feel like a similar energy to it, to the early David Gordon Green stuff, like George Washington and especially All the Real Girls. But this is more of a story of revenge, more or less. And while it's not the first movie from Michael Shannon by any stretch, I feel like it's a pretty good, he carries the movie kind of performance. Like, he had done things prior to this, certainly. He'd been part of ensembles, but this is a big, I don't want to say breakout, but it became a thing in that Jeff Nichols kind of, he didn't know Michael Shannon when he wrote this, when he wanted to make this movie. He had seen him and heard about him and sent him the script, and that really set off this relationship where he became kind of his De Niro to Nichols' Scorsese, and that he uses him in Take Shelter and Mud and Long Way Back Home, and he just becomes a part of, and Midnight Special, of course. He becomes a big part of Jeff Nichols' filmmaking. I think Take Shelter is particularly great. It's too bad that Second Sight Blu-ray is not in print, but this is neat because this is the first United States Blu-ray release of Shotgun Stories. I think it came out in Australia and maybe one other foreign territory prior to this, but it's become a movie that's difficult to see now because of its lack of streamability. You can't, as far as I can tell, you can't stream it right now, at least in the States. And so movies like this I hate to see disappear because it's a really remarkable debut. And in conversation with something like Blue Ruin, which also is a movie about revenge, which goes even darker than this movie, and this movie goes pretty dark. But basically, Jeff Nichols is from Little Rock, Arkansas, shot in Little Rock, Arkansas, and so the film takes place there. And I think it was shot on around a $250,000 budget, so very cheap. And he wanted to really show the landscapes and the people of the South, especially Arkansas, because that's where he was from. And he wanted to do it counter to what he'd been used to seeing in cinema, which is the South portrayed as in a lot of cliches and a lot of Southern characters being buffoons. And he said, you may think these characters are, but he's given them a certain humanity. And what the story is basically is about two parts of a family. Basically a family that is divided by the father figure who sired 3 boys. And I don't know if it's supposed to be something about the way he parented that he named them son, kid, and boy. So Michael Shannon is son Hayes and his brothers are kid and boy. And then there's another family that this guy went off and started with another woman. And that sort of comes out in the story. It's neat how it comes up because Michael Shannon at the beginning of the movie is sitting on his bed. He gets up, he turns his back to the camera, and he's got buckshot scars all across his back. And we never truly find out what that's about, why that happened. There are some theories. But his wife has just left him because he's got a gambling problem. He's trying to work out a system for counting cards, and it's not working. And she's taken their young son. So he invites his brother Kid, who's living in a tent outside the house, to come in. And he goes and finds his other brother Boy, who's living in a van for the summer. And they are a great group of guys, like just very soft-spoken. He talks about Southern folks not being particularly outwardly emotional, and these guys are definitely that. And then they get a message. Their mother, that they're estranged from, stops by and says, "Your father's died." And they're like, "Are you? Where's the funeral?" She's like, "Look it up in the paper." And you're like, oh, that doesn't sound good. And they're like, are you going? She's like, no. So you're like, okay, this is not a family that's in good shape. And so son, Hayes, and boy and kid go to this funeral, and we see this whole other family there. This woman who was obviously his dad was married to, and these other boys, like, younger but still adult-aged boys, men, at this funeral. And so son talks to the preacher and to the mom and says, I'd like to say a few words. And you're like, oh, okay, this will be interesting. And he decides to lay it down and start basically what ends up being a family feud by saying, you think this is a good man. This is not a good man. This is a man who left my brothers and I and with a spiteful, hateful woman and came and started a new family and a new Christian life. That doesn't make you a good man. He's not. And he spits on the coffin and just about starts a fist fight. And it's a heavy thing to do. And then they leave. And of course, this is sort of the lighting of the fuse between these two clans of men. And slowly they start to interact and violence starts to happen and things get pretty dark. And it's unclear where or if it will ever stop. And so it's a poignant story. It has a lot of funny moments. Like, it has little funny character moments that remind me of the funny bits in All the Real Girls or something like that. But it also has this poetic nature to it. It has a beautiful score done by Jeff Nichols' brother, mostly. And it's just a really powerful film, and a great showcase for Michael Shannon. And I can see why they came back to each other again and again. So it's a really powerful film, and I'm just excited to finally have it on Blu-ray. It has a commentary by Jeff Nichols, which is great. He goes through all the actors. Some of them are not really actors, like the guy who plays Boy was just somebody he went to college with. And he talks about casting everybody. He talks about locations. He talks about his family and their involvement in the film. And it's just a really kind of neat story of how this film came to be. There's also a 14-minute interview with him on camera, and that's where he goes into the stuff about cliches of the South and, revenge is an emotion basically that just about everybody can understand, even if they don't relate to it the same way these characters do, and talks about setting the stage for something bad that is coming, but you don't know when or how. And that is the essence of tragedy, but it's also the essence of narrative drive. And that's one of the things he says that gets people hooked in. And, it's just a really neat little film. And it's great to have Jeff Nichols' words on there as well to talk about it. So very cool stuff. Highly recommended. This is a Sony release along with City of Hope. They're doing really great work this year in terms of bringing some movies that are less seen to the marketplace again, and I really like that they brought that one out. Okay, so next up we have La Chimera. Now, this one was a film I hadn't seen, but was recommended to me after I saw Challengers. Now, I saw Challengers and I liked it. I wasn't of the, it's the greatest thing ever mindset. I think it's a very good film. But what really stood out to me was the performance of Josh O'Connor in that movie. Even against Zendaya and Mike Feist, I really felt that Josh O'Connor just blew me away. I thought he was just a remarkable performance, like a really unlikable character, but he gave such a humanity to it. He reminded me a little bit of Adam Driver in the way he looks and the way he acts, but he's definitely got his own thing going on. But so I kept hearing people saying, oh, well, you got to see La Chimera because he's so great in that. But I know he's going to get a lot of work off Challengers, and so I'm excited to see him in more films. La Chimera is very interesting. It's I guess, Italian film. The director is Alice Rohrwacher, and she this is the first film of hers that I've seen, and it is, well, I'll just read the everyone has their own chimera, something they try to achieve but never manage to find. For Arthur, the chimera looks like the woman he lost, Beniamina, in an adventurous journey between the living and the dead. between the forest and the cities, between the celebrations and the solitudes, the intertwined destinies of these characters unfold, all in search of La Chimera. Like, that doesn't really give you a lot about what this movie is. A more basic plot synopsis is that you have this guy played by Josh O'Connor who's just out of jail, and we find out he went to jail because he's sort of an archaeologist, and he has a bunch of friends. This is in Italy, I believe. He's got a bunch of friends that like to kind of grave rob. They kind of, find their way in and steal artifacts. And he's a little bit more, I guess, proper about it, a little bit more passionate about it. He's a crumpled English archaeologist, and he reconnects with this group of Tamborar. They're accomplices. It's basically a collective of itinerant, like I said, grave robbers who survive by looting Etruscan tombs and fencing the ancient treasures they dig up. Arthur isn't as interested in the actual artifacts, although he does have interest in that. But he's seeking this legendary door to the underworld and to find this girl that he lost. But it's a really fascinating movie, a really great performance. I can see why people recommended it after I saw Challengers, because he is fantastic in the movie. Also stars Isabella Rossellini as like his grandmother, and there's an interesting relationship that develops between his grandmother. I can't remember if she teaches singing or what, but she has a student, this woman that sort of, starts to have interactions with Josh O'Connor's character. But it is a long sort of labyrinthine tale of, romance and archaeology and, poignancy, really. There's a great short video of Alice Rohrwacher's, sorry about that pronunciation, watch list for Chimera from Letterboxd. And she talks about films that influenced the movie, which I think are good selling points to watch it. And one of the big ones she said, of course, is Raiders of the Lost Ark is a big one for her. Indiana Jones in general, I think. She has a great story about seeing that as a kid. She mentions Fellini's Roma as another point of entry, as well as a Pasolini film that I'm blanking on at the moment. But it was definitely a thing where, it's Acatone is the Pasolini film. And she, look up the video because she really does explain it much more eloquently than I ever could, but it's the kind of thing you watch and it makes you, and that and the combination of Josh O'Connor being in it will definitely make you want to watch this movie. Now, this doesn't have any extra features at all, unfortunately, but it is a nice Blu-ray release. This is also, is this Sony? No, this is Neon. It's a Neon Blu-ray. But nice to have this movie on disc, and check out more Josh O'Connor if you haven't. If you're a big Challengers fan, you definitely want to see it. It's a mostly Italian language film, but there is some English spoken in it. Next up I have, and lastly, this film called The Burglars from 1971. This is another Sony release. These are all region, by the way. The Shotgun Stories and this. Is La Chimera? No, that's region A. But this is a 1971 heist film, and it stars Jean-Paul Belmondo, Omar Sharif, Diane Cannon, a crack team of jewel thieves led by Azad. Jean-Paul Belmondo steals a valuable emerald collection in Athens. While the heist itself is successful, getting out of Athens proves problematic. A corrupt police detective, Omar Sharif, is on the chase with plans of his own for the stolen jewels. Basically, he wants to rip them off. Also, Diane Cannon, starring Diane Cannon, The Burglars is a tense, compelling thriller featuring a legendary car chase coordinated by Remy Julien and a score from Ennio Morricone, which is a great jazzy, freewheeling kind of score. I hadn't heard of this movie until this Blu-ray was announced. The director is Henry Verneuil. Sorry, I didn't pronounce that well either. Who did things like The Sicilian Clan, Any Number Can Win, Eye for Icarus, Fear Over the City, The Body of My Enemy, some other Belmondo movies, A Monkey in Winter. And it's solid. It's a solid thriller, a solid heist movie. It starts out a little slow, but once it gets going and gets to that car chase, it is a really great car chase. It has a lot of other great heist set pieces. And Belmondo is super cool in this, as usual. And so is Omar Sharif, actually. They're a great cat and mouse, like maybe one of the ideal cat and mouse kind of situations. This includes both the international version and the U.S. version. The U.S. version, of course, is in English. I can't tell if it's just dubbed in English or if they reshot the scenes, but it looks to be native French. So the Italian version, or the international version, is 126 minutes, and the U.S. version is 114 minutes. So a little over 10 minutes in length added there between the two versions, and they're on two separate discs, which I thought was a very classy move to put them both there. Unfortunately, no features on this one, which is too bad, but this feels like a, heist gem that folks need to discover. If you like Belmondo, he did a lot of great stuff, and there's some really insane stunts in this, like one with a dump truck. I don't know how people aren't killed or really hurt badly in some of these stunts. So it's neat to see a guy like that doing his own stuff. But like I said, just a great tete-a-tete back and forth with Belmondo and Sharif, and a solid heist movie that I think needs another look, or a first look. And looks great on this transfer. Really beautiful 235 widescreen Blu-ray on both versions, both discs. Anyway, thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.